Have you ever agreed to something you thought you could control, only to find out you were the one being changed? That's what this story is about. It begins with a lie, wrapped in luxury and sealed with a signature. A contract marriage. No love, no feelings, just business. Or at least, that was the deal. But what if fake love doesn't stay fake forever? And what if the heart catches fire right in the middle of a cold, calculated arrangement? If you're here because that title grabbed you, I promise, you're about to uncover a romance that will twist your emotions and leave you questioning everything you think you know about love, power, and trust. And yes, you will absolutely get the answer that brought you here. But only if you stay with me till the very end, because the truth, it doesn't show itself in the first kiss or the first fight. It waits until it hurts, until it's real. Now, before we go any deeper, I want you to take a second. Look around. Where are you right now? On your bed? At work, pretending to be focused? Curled up in a blanket hoping for a little escape? I see you. I know what it feels like to crave a story that doesn't just entertain you, but pulls you in so deep you forget the world for a while. And I promise, this isn't just another billionaire love story with a fake wife trope. This is about the chaos that happens when two broken souls sign away their freedom and unknowingly give each other the one thing they've never had, a chance at real, messy, breathtaking love. Let me paint the first picture. She's standing in front of a mirror, a stranger in a wedding dress she didn't choose, her eyes glassy with panic, but her spine straight like steel. Her name is Emily Clark. She's smart, sharp, and fresh out of grad school with a mountain of medical debt and a mother who needs round-the-clock care. She's never believed in love, not really, not since her father vanished and left her mom holding nothing but bills and promises. So when an offer lands in her inbox with more zeros than she's ever seen, she doesn't waste time wondering if it's real. She just meets him at the address, signs a contract, and steps into a life that feels like a movie. But there's a twist. There's always a twist. His name is Julian Wolfe. Yeah, you've heard of him. Billionaire tech genius. Cold, controlled, infamously private. A man who hates distractions and sees emotions as liabilities. He doesn't need a wife. He needs a front, a way to secure a billion-dollar merger with a traditional family-run empire that requires their partners to appear stable, married, respectable, relatable. So he creates the terms. No touching, no drama, no feelings, just appearances, public smiles, coordinated interviews, joint charity events. A 12-month contract, then freedom. Clean, easy, but life doesn't play by business rules. And hearts? They never read the fine print. By now, you're wondering what makes this contract marriage story different from the hundreds you've heard before. Let me tell you, this isn't a story built on fake tension or forced chemistry. It's built on what happens when two people start seeing each other, not as roles, not as problems to solve, but as mirrors. Julian, with all his money and power, has never been seen for who he is beneath the perfection. Emily, used to being invisible, suddenly finds herself under a spotlight so bright it threatens to blind her. And somewhere between stage kisses and late-night arguments, between cold silences and unexpected laughter, something shifts. Something real begins to bloom in the cracks of what was supposed to be a lie. Think about this for a moment. How often do we put on a version of ourselves just to survive? How many times do we fake strength, fake happiness, fake love, just to get through the day? This story gets under your skin because it speaks to something universal. The ache of wanting to be chosen for who you are, not what you can offer. The longing to feel safe in someone else's arms, even when you've been burned before. And yeah, it's wrapped in glitz and glamour and all the trending billionaire romance fantasy keywords. Contract marriage, fake love, enemies of lovers. But what makes it hit hard is the emotion, the honesty, the cracks that turn into doorways. And if you're still watching, that means you're not just curious, you're connected. Maybe you're rooting for her. Maybe you see a part of yourself in Emily's quiet resilience. Or maybe you're fascinated by Julian and wondering what kind of man chooses to buy companionship instead of risking his heart. Whatever your reason, know this is your story now, too. You're not just a viewer. You're inside this with them. You're going to feel what they feel. The confusion, the denial, the jealousy, the tension, and yes, the moment it all shifts from fake to terrifyingly real. Now let's talk about the stakes, because this isn't just about two people playing house. There are secrets buried under this contract, hidden motives that neither of them sees coming. Julian isn't telling her everything, and Emily? She's not as desperate as she pretends to be. There's someone watching from the shadows, someone who benefits from keeping them apart. A business deal that's tied to more than just money. A past that's about to erupt. And the moment they start falling for each other is the same moment everything around them starts to collapse. That's the danger of love in disguise. It becomes a very thing that can destroy you. And here's something you're going to want to hold on to. They never meant to fall in love. They tried everything to prevent it. Rules, boundaries, distance, even pretending to hate each other. But love doesn't care about logic. It shows up like a fire, sometimes warm, sometimes wild, sometimes impossible to contain. And when it starts burning, there's no going back. No undoing the kiss that wasn't supposed to happen. No denying the way his hand lingers just a second too long. No stopping the nightmares that only she can calm. No escaping the truth that the contract never protected them. It just trapped them in a different kind of vulnerability. If you've made it this far, thank you. Seriously. You're not just here for the title, the drama, or the juicy romance moments you know are coming. You're here for the why. You want to know how it ends. Whether this contract marriage actually turns into something real, or if it all falls apart the moment they are forced to confront their fears. And I promise, you'll get your answer. You'll see it unravel, piece by piece. You'll feel it rise, crash, and twist in ways you never saw coming. But only if you stay with me, because the biggest moment, the one that changes everything, it hasn't happened yet. So here's where we leave them for now, on the balcony of a hotel suite high above the city. Emily, barefoot and trembling, clutching a glass of wine she hasn't touched. Julian, standing beside her in silence, jaw tight, watching the skyline like it holds the answers. Between them, a silence that feels louder than any fight. A confession on the tip of his tongue. A truth she isn't ready to hear. Because just hours earlier, she found something. Something hidden in his study. A photo, a woman, a ring, and a date exactly 1 year before he met her. So now the question isn't just, will fake love turn real? The question is, what was real before she ever walked into his life? ChatGPT said. Emily hadn't expected the photo to shake her this much. It wasn't just that it existed. It was how it had been hidden. Tucked in a locked drawer at the back of Julian's private study, behind stacks of perfectly organized financial documents and sterile contracts, as if it were the one thing that didn't belong. The woman in the picture was smiling, her arm wrapped around Julian's waist like they'd known each other forever. The ring on her finger wasn't just decorative. It matched the one Julian had casually claimed never to have worn. But what rattled Emily more than anything was a date scrawled neatly on the back, March 14th, last year. 1 year to the day before she signed her life away in that crisp white room where lawyers smiled and Julian never looked up from his phone. Why did he still have that photo? Why was it hidden? And why had he never mentioned anyone before her? She sat in that silence for what felt like hours, that image burning behind her eyelids like a warning sign she didn't know how to read. Every memory she thought she'd started to trust suddenly felt flimsy. The gentle way he brushed her hair behind her ear during interviews. The careful way he wrapped his hand around her waist at charity galas. The look in his eyes the night he told her, "Don't ever think I chose you just because it was convenient." Had that been true? Or just another performance he perfected? Emily had entered the arrangement eyes wide open, knowing love wasn't part of the deal. But somewhere between the stage dates and shared dinners, she'd started to wonder if the lines were blurring for both of them. Now, with one photograph, everything tilted sideways. To understand how Emily got here, you need to go back just 3 months. She was working 2 jobs, one as a barista by day, one as an overnight typist for a medical transcription company. Her mother's treatments had drained what little savings she'd scraped together, and despite graduating top of her class, the reality of debt in a post-pandemic world had cornered her into survival mode. That's when the email arrived. No subject line. No sender. Just a link to an encrypted message. Are you willing to sign a contract that will change your life? She clicked it, thinking it was a scam. But what she found was an NDA, followed by an invitation to meet in person at a rooftop restaurant overlooking Manhattan, where Julian Wolfe waited in a tailored suit, offering her everything she needed in exchange for one thing: her signature. At first, Emily thought it was a setup, some twisted social experiment or viral dating prank for YouTube. But Julian was deadly serious. He spoke in straight lines, as if every word had already been vetted by his legal team. "You will live in my penthouse. We will be seen together regularly. I will cover your mother's care in full. And in return, you will play the role of my wife. Nothing more, nothing less." It wasn't romance. It was strategy. Julian didn't want chaos. He wanted predictability. She agreed, thinking she could stay detached, that her heart, too bruised to be reckless, wouldn't be foolish enough to believe in the possibility of more. But that's the thing about proximity. It changes people. Slowly, quietly. And by the time she noticed the shift, it was too late. Their first month together was all precision. Scheduled dates, coordinated outfits, scripts they memorized before each event. But even in the artificial glow of a carefully crafted marriage, something unexpected began to take root. Julian, for all his calculated coldness, wasn't unkind. He was distant, yes, but never cruel. In fact, he seemed to study her the way a man studies a language he doesn't yet speak, curious, hesitant, always holding back. She found herself drawn to his restraint, to the way his hands trembled ever so slightly when they brushed haze. And she noticed things: how he never talked about his family, how he never mentioned friends, how his phone never rang with calls that weren't about business. He was a man surrounded by people, but utterly alone, just like her. But now, everything that felt honest is stained by that photo. Who was that woman? An ex? A fiancé? A ghost from a life he buried? Julian had never mentioned past relationships. Emily had assumed it was part of his armor, like everything else. But maybe it wasn't protection. Maybe it was deception. Maybe the man she was beginning to fall for wasn't just guarded. Maybe he was hiding something. Something big enough to make her question everything. And that's where the story starts to splinter. There was also the matter of Julian's assistant, Theo, a man too smooth, too observant, always watching from the shadows of the penthouse like he knew more than he let on. He'd been the one who handed Emily the contract that first day. He'd smiled politely, spoken little, and yet there was a flicker in his eyes, something unreadable. She hadn't thought much of it then, but lately he seemed increasingly tense. He flinched when Julian came near, changed the subject whenever Emily asked about the company. Once, she caught him shredding documents after hours, papers stamped with a logo she didn't recognize. And last week, when she passed him in the hallway, he whispered without turning, "Be careful what you dig up. Some things aren't meant to be found." Emily didn't know what he meant at the time. But now, after finding that photo, his warning plays in her mind like a siren. Maybe there are more secrets buried in this life she stepped into. Maybe Julian isn't the only one with hidden motives. The longer she stays, the more the polished perfection of their arrangement begins to crack. She finds emails with missing timestamps, a security camera in the living room that was never there before, a room in the penthouse that's always locked and always cold, even when the rest of the house is warm. There's a woman named Alessandra who called the penthouse line every Thursday and hangs up when Emily answers. There's a key on Julian's keyring marked with an engraved S that he keeps separate from the rest. And yet, through it all, Julian's behavior remains unchanged. If he suspects she knows something, he doesn't show it. He's still attentive during their public appearances, still distant in private. But every now and then, when he thinks she isn't looking, his gaze lingers on her like he's trying to memorize something, like he's bracing for a goodbye. And that's what scares her most. Because if this was always meant to be fake, why does it feel like he's the one trying not to fall apart? Emily is torn between two instincts, the urge to run and the need to understand. She knows the smart thing would be to keep pretending, to smile, to nod, to let the days tick by until the contract ends. But curiosity is a powerful thing, and when the heart is involved, silence becomes unbearable. She wants answers, not just about the woman in the photo, but about the man she's slowly starting to love. Is Julian Wolfe really the emotionless billionaire he pretends to be, or is he hiding from something, someone? And more importantly, did he choose her because she fit the profile, or because she reminded him of someone he lost? The more Emily digs, the more the questions pile up. But every time she gets close to the truth, something happens to distract her. A sudden trip Julian insists she take, alone. A charity event where a woman in red keeps staring at her from across the room. A news article that disappears from the internet the day after she saves it. Red herrings or warnings. Accidents or signs. She can't tell. And that's exactly what makes the tension unbearable. Because this isn't just a love story anymore. It's a puzzle. A performance. A slow burn unraveling that threatens to expose more than just secrets. It could expose them both. And tonight, on that balcony, with Julian finally reaching for the words as never said, Emily is about to make a choice. Confront him, or stay silent. Trust her gut, or walk away. But the wind shifts, and just as he opens his mouth to speak, the lights in the penthouse flicker, and everything goes dark. Shadows move behind the glass. Someone else is inside. The power blinked out so fast Emily barely had time to register the darkness before her instincts kicked in. A hand clutched her wrist, Julian's, but not in a panic way. It was firm, calculated, protective. He whispered her name like a warning, low and close, and for 1 10-second, neither of them moved. The only sounds were the wind outside and the hum of backup generators trying to catch up. But in the reflection of the blackened glass doors, Emily saw it clearly. Someone moving behind them. Slow, deliberate, not rushing to escape, but as if they belonged there. By the time Julian flung open the doors, the room was empty. Nothing stolen. Nothing broken. But the silence had changed. It wasn't just quiet. It was violated. The kind of silence that makes your skin itch. Julian called security, his voice low but sharp, and within minutes, men in dark suits swept the penthouse, checking windows, back exits, camera feeds. All of them came back with the same answer. No sign of forced entry, no footage of anyone entering or leaving. But Emily knew what she'd seen. That shape, that presence. It wasn't paranoia. Someone had been there. Someone who knew how to move without leaving a trace. And what's worse, they wanted to be seen. It felt like a message, not a burglary. A threat disguised as silence. But Julian didn't speak about it again that night. He retreated into his usual cold efficiency, brushing off the incident with a vague "I'll handle it," and returning to his office like the moment never happened. That only made it worse. Because if he wasn't surprised, did that mean he was expecting it? While Julian buried himself in meetings and stock reports, Emily reached out to the only person she trusted, her childhood friend, Natalie. They hadn't spoken much since Emily disappeared into this strange new life, but one late-night call was all it took for Natalie to answer. Her voice was sleepy, but warm, and when Emily explained what happened, without revealing too much, Natalie's tone shifted. She hesitated, then said something that made Emily freeze. I don't know if this is just a coincidence, but I got a weird message last night, too. It wasn't an email this time. It was a printed envelope slid under Natalie's apartment door in Queens. No return address. Inside was a single photo of Emily, taken just a few days ago, standing on the balcony of the penthouse, her back to the city lights. Below it, typed in small, mechanical font, were the words, "She's not who you think she is." Natalie thought it was a prank. Maybe a stalker. But now, with everything happening at the penthouse, it didn't feel random. Someone was watching Emily from the outside, closely enough to follow her movements, track her friends, and send warnings to people from her past. But what did it mean? Was it a warning for Natalie or a threat for Emily? And who had taken the photo? There were only a handful of buildings tall enough and close enough to get that angle. Whoever sent it had access to more than just camera equipment. They had access to her life. Emily felt like she was being hunted in slow motion. That every truth she uncovered opened up 2 new questions. She tried to ask Julian about the security breach the next day, but he brushed her off again. Nothing was taken, he said, typing into his phone. "It's handled." But the way he refused to meet her eyes said something else. He was rattled, just hiding it better. And that's when she noticed something strange. His schedule, normally predictable to the minute, had changed. He was leaving earlier, coming back later, taking calls in French. Once, she caught a glimpse of a paper in his briefcase marked with a different name entirely, Sebastian Vallois. When she asked about it, he calmly closed the case and said, "Don't go through my things, Emily. That's not part of the agreement. The agreement, that stupid, clinical word that made her feel like she'd signed up for a science experiment instead of a relationship. But even that was starting to fall apart, because there were more cracks forming every day. Like the text message he saw flash across Julian's phone while he was in the shower. You told me she was gone. No contact name. Just that chilling sentence. Gone. Who was supposed to be gone? Emily? The woman in the photo? Someone else entirely? And why did Julian erase the message the moment he saw her glance at it, as if his reflexes had practiced that motion before? Meanwhile, Natalie's situation got worse. Someone broke into her car the next night, not to steal anything, but to leave something. Another envelope, this time with a thumb drive inside. Natalie didn't want to open it. She said it felt cursed. But curiosity won, and what they found was chilling audio recordings. Dozens of them. Conversations between Emily and Julian from inside the penthouse. Moments she didn't even remember saying out loud. Some were from months ago, others from just days ago. They weren't phone taps, they were room bugs. Someone had planted listening devices in her home. That meant whoever was behind this wasn't just watching. They were inside, listening, following, waiting. The realization made Emily feel physically ill, that her life had been under surveillance, that her emotions, her confusion, her slow realization that maybe she was falling in love with a man she was paid to marry, had been recorded like episodes of a twisted reality show. And now someone else had access to that intimacy. Someone who seemed to know more about her relationship than she did. But what were they trying to prove? That Julian had planned this all along? That Emily was being used? Or was the message more sinister, that Julian wasn't the manipulator, but the victim? Was someone trying to destroy him from the outside? Suddenly, even the people who once seemed trustworthy began to feel suspect. Theo, the assistant, who was now mysteriously absent without explanation. Julian claimed he was on leave, but Emily found his access card still in the staff locker. Then there was a housekeeper, Lucia, who started showing up at odd hours and asked pointed questions like, "Do you ever hear footsteps at night?" Emily thought she was being friendly, but now she wondered if Lucia was warning her or testing her. And still, through all of it, Julian refused to talk. He buried himself in his work, deflecting questions, keeping her at arm's length. But every time she tried to walk away, he stopped her with something small, an unexpected kindness, a rare smile, a flash of vulnerability that didn't match the cold exterior. He wasn't innocent, but maybe he wasn't a villain either. Maybe they were both caught in something larger than either of them realized. The stakes were no longer about a fake marriage. This was about control, surveillance, secrets so layered they could ruin lives. And for the first time, Emily wasn't sure who was protecting whom, or why. All she knew was that someone wanted her gone, and someone else wanted her to stay just long enough to unravel everything. Then, just when Emily thought it couldn't get worse, a new envelope arrived. This time, addressed to her. No stamp, no name, just a single sheet of paper inside. It read, "The contract ends in 10 days. If you're still here, you'll wish you weren't." No explanation, no signature, just a countdown and a promise. And Emily finally understood. The clock wasn't just ticking on her agreement with Julian. It was ticking on her life. The morning that should have started like any other began with silence too sharp to ignore. Emily had woken up early, haunted by uneasy dreams and the echo of those final words on the letter. The contract ends in 10 days. If you're still here, you'll wish you weren't. The paper still sat on her nightstand, wrinkled from her trembling fingers the night before. And though she had tried to convince herself it was a hoax, some sick prank meant to rattle her, the silence in the penthouse felt like a confirmation. The staff hadn't shown up. No sound of Lucia shuffling in the kitchen. No low murmur of security comes down the hall. It was as if the place had been evacuated without her. Her calls went unanswered, and even Julian's number, usually picked up within 2 rings, went straight to voicemail. Something wasn't just wrong. It was off. Like the world around her had taken a breath and never let it out. Emily made coffee with shaking hands, the machine's mechanical sputter feeling too loud in the cavernous stillness. She tried the landline, thinking maybe self-service was down, but the tone was dead. And then she noticed the elevator panel flashing red, locked from the outside. She hadn't thought much about the biometric override before, but now it pulsed like a warning. She wasn't alone. Or maybe, she was alone, and locked in. And that's when her phone finally buzzed. A message. No sender. No text. Just an image. Natalie's apartment door, slightly ajar, the edge of a red high heel just visible. Emily stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before her body moved. She barely registered grabbing her bag, barely felt the cold metal of the penthouse doorknob as she yanked it open. She ran down the emergency stairwell, 40 floors, barefoot, heart pounding with every echoing step, until she hit the lobby, gasping, desperate for air. The doorman wasn't at his station. The desk light was still on, coffee half full, but no one there. Emily felt her body tremble as she walked out into the street, the late morning traffic and pedestrians blurring past like static. She hailed a cab and begged the driver to hurry. Natalie's building in Queens wasn't far, but the trip felt endless. She stared out the window, replaying every conversation with Natalie, every subtle moment that had felt off. Had she pulled her friend into something dangerous just by asking for help? Had someone used Natalie as bait? When she finally arrived, her stomach dropped. The door was indeed ajar, just like in the photo. Her voice cracked as she called out, "Natalie?" No answer. She pushed the door open. The apartment was lit, quiet, and clean. Too clean. No sign of a struggle. Nothing broken. Nothing missing. Except Natalie. The only thing left behind was a cup of coffee, still warm, sitting next to an open book on the couch. Emily's fingers trembled as she touched it. Natalie had been here. Not long ago. The air still held her perfume. But now she was gone. And Weiss. Someone had sent that photo before Emily could have possibly known she was missing. Which meant they were watching both of them. Anticipating Emily's every move. Herding her. Leading her towards something she didn't yet understand. The walls felt like they were closing in, but she fought the panic long enough to search the apartment. Her instinct said Natalie wouldn't have left willingly. And they were right. Inside Natalie's bedroom, Emily found it. Another envelope, taped under the drawer, clearly placed for her to find. This time, there was no message. Just a USB stick and a small, heart-shaped charm on a silver chain. Emily recognized it immediately. It was from high school. A cheap friendship necklace they had each worn half of, laughing about soulmates and forever bonds. The sight of it now made her chest tighten. She couldn't tell if it was meant as a gesture of hope or warning. She took the USB and raced back to the penthouse, instinct screaming that whatever was on that drive was the next piece in the puzzle she was now trapped inside. She plugged it into her laptop, heart racing, and waited. A folder popped up, unnamed. Inside were 6 video files. She clicked the first. It was grainy security footage. Natalie at a coffee shop, sitting alone, typing on her phone. Then a man appeared. His face was obscured by a baseball cap, but his posture looked familiar. He sat across from her, and they talked for 7 minutes. No audio, just visuals. But the final 10 seconds were chilling. The man reached out, gently placed his hand over hers, and Natalie froze. Like she knew, in that moment, she'd made a mistake. Emily opened the second file. This time, it was Natalie walking through a parking garage. The same man was behind her, always just a few steps back, never close enough to be noticed, but definitely there. Following, watching, patient. And with each new video file, the message became clearer. Natalie had been under surveillance too. But why? What had she found out? What did she know? The final video showed something Emily couldn't process at first. It was a view from above, likely a drone, recording the top floor of Julian's office building. Through the tinted glass windows, she saw him, Julian, standing with someone else. The video zoomed in, and though the resolution was bad, she could make out the outline of a woman. Slim build, long dark hair, back toned. But when the woman turned ever so slightly to the side, Emily's blood ran cold. It was her, or someone who looked exactly like her. She paused the footage, staring at the screen, heart pounding in her throat. The resemblance wasn't just similar, it was exact. From the curve of the jaw to the posture to the way the woman touched her necklace. Her necklace. The same one Julian had given her on their wedding day. but she hadn't worn it in weeks. So who was this woman, and why was Julian with her? Her thoughts spiraled as the implications sank in. Was it a twin? A double? A stand-in? Always. Had Julian known this other woman before the contract ever began? Was Emily being replaced? Or had she been filling someone else's shoes all along? Every memory she had with Julian now blurred. Every stolen glance, every argument, every moment that felt real. Had any of it meant anything? Was this just a long con? Or a test she didn't know she was taking? The paranoia became unbearable. She started searching the penthouse again, ripping open vents, checking under furniture, scanning bookshelf for hidden cameras or listening devices. And that's when she found the camera lens behind the painting in her bedroom. Tiny, professional, buried in the wall and wired through the frame. It had been recording everything. All this time. And for the first time, Emily knew with absolute certainty she wasn't just in a fake marriage anymore. She was in a game. And she was losing. The USB had rattled her. The videos had shaken her sense of reality. But nothing could have prepared Emily for what she found next, because while she had been busy tearing apart the penthouse in a haze of paranoia, trying to spot hidden bugs and tracing Julian's secrets, she hadn't noticed the blinking light on her laptop had turned green. Something had activated. When she sat down and moved the mouse, a new window popped open. A chat box. No name, no platform, just a blinking cursor and one line of text that hadn't been there before. You're not the first. But you might be the last. Her breath caught in her throat. Her first instinct was to close the laptop, to disconnect, to run. But her hands hovered over the keyboard, trembling, curiosity too powerful. She typed, "Who are you?" The reply was instant. Check the folder labeled Gray Room. You missed it. Emily hadn't seen any folder like that before. She retraced her steps, opened the USB directory again, and there it was, Gray Room. Hidden. Invisible unless you searched the device manually. She opened it. Inside was only one video. This time, there was no surveillance footage, no eerie drone angle, just a dimly lit room with walls painted dull slate gray, completely windowless. A single chair sat in the center, bolted to the floor, and seated in it was Julian, shackled, disheveled, bruised, eyes hollow like he hadn't slept in days. Emily's heart stopped. The timestamp was from 3 nights ago. She turned the volume up. It was grainy, distorted, but his voice came through, raspy, broken. If you're watching this, then I failed. They know. I tried to keep you away. I swear I tried. I thought the contract would protect you, that it would keep their focus on me. But they want you. They always did. I just didn't know why. Emily's vision blurred. Her knees buckled and she dropped to the couch, breath shallow, pulse hammering in her ears. None of this made sense. Julian was the one in control, confident, powerful, always one step ahead. He couldn't be the one locked up. And yet, here he was, shackled and whispering like a man who'd been hunted. There's a room behind the wine cellar, he continued. Codes the day we met. They're listening. I couldn't say more. Then the screen cut to static. That was it. No more footage. No explanation. Just a brutal collapse of everything she thought she understood. She ran, literally, down the stairs, barefoot again, heart pounding louder than her footsteps. She reached the cellar, hands fumbling with a keypad as the lights flickered above her like some cruel horror film. Her fingers shook as she punched in the date, August 18th, and for a second she thought nothing would happen. Then she heard the click. A panel slid open. Behind the wine racks, a steel door led to a narrow hallway she had never seen before. The air inside was colder, staler, as if time itself hadn't moved here in years. At the end of the corridor, she found it, a room. Metallic, clinical. Monitors lined the walls, displaying what looked like stock price fluctuations, digital maps, and biometric scans. She had stumbled into something deeper than any marital deception. This was surveillance, global, organized. And Julian was a piece on the board, not the player she'd assumed. And then came the twist that shattered everything. The screen on the far right flickered to life. A live feed of herself, sitting on the couch upstairs just moments ago. But she wasn't alone. Someone was in the frame with her. Natalie, alive, talking calmly, holding her hand, smiling. Only Emily hadn't seen Natalie. That conversation hadn't happened. Her mind reeled. The timestamp said it was today. 10 minutes ago. She rewound. Natalie spoke clearly. She'll crack soon. Julian underestimated her. We all did. But she's still playing her role. Another voice chimed in off-screen, Emily's own voice. But it wasn't her speaking. It was a simulation, an AI-generated version of her, playing on a loop. She watched, horrified, as a fake Emily said, "I think I can still make her believe it. Give me a little more time." The flaw dropped out beneath her. What if she wasn't just being watched? What if she was being duplicated, used, shadowed? This wasn't about love anymore. Not even about Julian. It was about something bigger, something deeper. Natalie was in on it, or maybe forced into it. Maybe not even herself anymore. But that footage showed too much certainty, too much calm. This wasn't a woman trying to save her friend. This was someone monitoring an experiment. And Emily? She was the experiment. She had no idea who was behind it, or how long it had been going on. But she knew this. She had been chosen, handpicked, tested for something far beyond a fake marriage contract. And then the final horror struck her. On a table beside the monitors was a binder, thick, labeled in block red letters, Subject EM02, Adaptation Trial, Phase 3. She opened it with trembling hands. Inside were documents, photos from her childhood, her medical records, psychological evaluations dated before she ever met Julian. Page after page of data proving she had been tracked for years, selected, controlled, maybe even created. And in that moment, one final realization settled in like cold ash. This wasn't a story about falling in love under false pretenses. This was a carefully engineered illusion. She wasn't just in danger. She was part of something she might never escape from. Let me know when you're ready to peel back the next layer, because what Emily finds next will blow the entire truth wide open. She stood in front of the mirror in Julian's office, hands shaking, eyes red from hours of crying but no longer willing to run. Everything she knew, everything she believed, had collapsed like ash in her mouth. Emily had gone from unsuspecting bride in a contract marriage to the centerpiece of an elaborate psychological experiment cloaked in the illusion of love. The surveillance, the AI-generated voice, the fake footage of Natalie, Julian's eerie message from a gray room, all of it was orchestrated by an entity so vast, so deeply embedded into her life, that even her own memories now felt suspect. And now she was staring at a final clue, a biometric access scanner behind a false panel in the mirror, exposed when she dropped the candle holder during one of her panic-fueled breakdowns. This wasn't just Julian's office. It was the access point to the control room, and it would only open for her. When she pressed her hand to the scanner, the wall split silently and slid open, revealing a dark passage lit with low blue LEDs that throbbed like veins. She didn't hesitate anymore. She walked. Every step felt like wading deeper into a labyrinth with no guarantee of return. At the end of the tunnel was another door, larger than the others, labeled only with the word observation. Beyond it, the final truth awaited. She pushed it open and stepped into the heart of it all. A theater. That was the only way to describe it. Rows of computers, giant screens projecting real-time feeds of cities across the globe. Dozens of people in black, silent, working like machines, heads down. And in the center, a raised glass platform. Inside stood Natalie, alive, real, and completely unchanged from how Emily remembered her, but different now in posture, in gaze, in presence. She wasn't a victim. She was the architect. "You made it," Natalie said softly, her voice echoing through the chamber like it had been waiting in the air for years. And yet, even in peace, the echo of the system remained. Sometimes, when she rang up a customer or shelved a book, she'd catch a flicker of a face from the program, a person who'd been surveilled, a lover from a simulated memory, a staffer whose eyes once glowed with artificial precision. Were they real now? Had they ever been? Once, she saw a young woman recording a video in the romance section of the store. The girl was smiling, talking about her favorite book, something about a billionaire falling for his fake wife. Emily froze. The girl looked up. Their eyes met for only a second. But in that second, something passed between them. Recognition? Understanding? Or maybe the system, though destroyed, had never needed servers to begin with. Maybe the program wasn't digital. Maybe it was human. Maybe we were always the code. The world moved on. People fell in and out of love, still searched YouTube for contract marriage romance, still clung to stories where fake love could turn real. And Emily watched quietly, knowing the irony, knowing that her story, the one you just watched, was both a warning and an invitation. Not everything on a screen is fiction. Not every twist is scripted. Sometimes the line between simulation and sincerity is so thin, so blurred, that even the people inside the story don't realize when they've crossed it. Years passed. One morning, Emily opened the backroom drawer of the bookstore and found a single envelope. No return address. No stamp. Inside was a photograph, her and Julian, laughing under a string of paper lanterns, a moment that had never happened in real life. It had been generated, planted into her memory, and yet the emotion was real. She remembered that laugh, that joy, that feeling of being seen. On the back, in his handwriting, were the words, "Some truths are built from lies, but they are still ours." No signature, just closure, or maybe a new beginning. And that's how the story ends, or continues, depending on how you see it. The cameras are off now, but you're still watching, still wondering. Maybe the real experiment was never about Emily or Julian or Natalie. Maybe it was always about you. What you believe, what you feel, what you're willing to accept as real when you're told it's just fiction. That final twist? It's not in the story. It's in how you see the world after this. So before you close this tab, ask yourself, how much of your life would you recognize if it were written by someone else?